The Subcommittee on Research and Technology will now come to order. Good morning and welcome to today's hearing entitled Strategic Planning for National Manufacturing Competitiveness. In front of you are packets containing the written testimony, biographies, and truth and testimony disclosures for today's witness panel. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Again, good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's hearing, which is being held to examine H.R. 2447, the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act, sponsored by the Subcommittee Ranking Member, Mr. Lipinski. Manufacturing has been a critical part of the American economic competitiveness since the Industrial Revolution. Many of the groundbreaking technologies that are widely deployed today are the result of American ingenuity in manufacturing. Manufacturing represents approximately 11% of the American economy, and manufacturing output has risen by 13% over the last several years. Manufacturing also has the greatest multiplier effect of any major sector in the American economy. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, for each dollar spent in manufacturing generates an additional $1.35 in spending. In my state of Indiana, there are 9,698 manufacturers, probably changing every day, employing 556,000 workers, with 16.4% of our workforce employed in the manufacturing industry. Indiana ranks first in manufacturing employment and second in manufacturing as a gross state product nationwide. The 8th District of Indiana is home to many of these manufacturers, and I have seen the work being done firsthand at manufacturers like Berry Plastics, whose CEO will testify today, Toyota Motor Corporation, and Alcoa, amongst many others. Universities, along with the manufacturers, universities like Vincennes University, the University of Evansville, and the University of Southern Indiana offer degrees related to advanced manufacturing and are working closely with businesses to develop a talented and well-trained workforce, which is critical. Clearly, manufacturing is of critical importance to the American economy. However, employment in this sector is significantly lower as a share of the economy than in the post-World War II era. Further, we have seen reports from prominent think tanks such as the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation arguing that America is losing its competitiveness in manufacturing and may suffer a relative decline as a result. As a country, we lack a strategic plan to guide economic policy decisions that affect American manufacturing competitiveness. We have heard a number of proposals by the administration to establish expensive federal manufacturing programs. However, these programs have come without a plan that addresses the comprehensive competitive environment faced by today's American manufacturers. Today's hearing allows us to examine the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2013, which calls on the National Science and Technology Council's Committee on Technology to develop a national manufacturing competitiveness plan. It would task the committee with conducting an analysis of the factors that affect American manufacturing competitiveness, such as tax issues, trade, workforce, and intellectual property factors. The goals of the strategic plan are to promote economic and employment growth in the manufacturing sector, support a skilled workforce, enable innovation and investment in manufacturing, and support national security. I believe such a strategic plan, if developed responsibly, can have positive implications for America's manufacturers and can lead to policies that improve our competitiveness. However, I have some reservations about the development and implementation of the plan. First, it's critically important that a strategic plan reflects the real needs of our nation's manufacturers and should not be politicized and used as a tool to advance favored interests. Second, reflecting the recommendations of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, a manufacturing plan must not serve as industry policy. The federal government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers. Finally, we should ensure that this plan does not promote manufacturing at the expense of all the other sectors of our economy. I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses on their thoughts about the proposed legislation, including any recommendations they have for possible improvements. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today and look forward to their testimony. And I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lipinski, the gentleman from Illinois, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and I'd like to thank Chairman Smith for holding this hearing on this bipartisan bill I introduced with Representative Kinzinger. As you said, the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act, H.R. 2447. I've been working for the last 4 years on this legislation that would put more Americans to work by creating an economic environment that would boost domestic manufacturing. In each of the past 2 Congresses, under both Democratic and Republican majorities, this bill has passed with overwhelming support. And I'm hopeful that we can now work together to not only pass a bill in the House, but finally get this common sense idea into law. At its core, this legislation is simply about bringing the private and public sectors together to develop a forward-looking set of recommendations for the tax, workforce, energy, trade, R&D, regulatory, and other policies that would best enable domestic manufacturers to compete globally and put more Americans to work. A vibrant manufacturing sector is critical for America's economic success and the success of the middle class. In 2011, manufacturing contributed $1.8 trillion to our nation's economy and accounted for 47% of all U.S. exports. Successful manufacturers provide the economy with huge job numbers. For example, Boeing employs 172,000 people compared to Facebook, which employs about 4,900 people. These are jobs with wages and benefits that are 1/3 higher than in other sectors. Plus, manufacturing has an incredibly high multiplier effect. For every manufacturing job we create, we add 5 additional jobs. And as a source of nearly 2/3 of U.S. investment in research and development, manufacturing drives innovation. When we lose our capacity to manufacture, we lose much of our ability to create the breakthrough technologies and products of tomorrow. Simply put, made in America equals American jobs and a strong economy. And let us never forget that manufacturing is critical to defending America. We cannot afford to outsource our nation's defense. But while manufacturing remains vital to the American economy, since the 1970s, the number of manufacturing jobs has been shrinking, from 20 million in 1979 to fewer than 12 million today. The recent recession hit workers in manufacturing especially hard, and China is poised to overtake America as the world's leading manufacturer. The hemorrhaging of manufacturing jobs has contributed to stagnation of middle-class wages. Since 2000, the inflation-adjusted median household income has fallen by about $4,800. But recently there have been some good signs, with American manufacturing showing signs of a comeback. Continued American leadership and innovation and a domestic energy boom could help spur a manufacturing renaissance. However, challenges do remain. Many other nations have national manufacturing strategies. It is not just countries like China, but also Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and many others have strategies to help their domestic manufacturers. Meanwhile, the U.S. has a multitude of overlapping federal agencies and policies that impact manufacturers without any coordination. Let me be clear. What this bill calls for is not an industrial policy or picking winners and losers. But the federal government already has countless departments, agencies, programs, and policies that affect manufacturing, from our tax code to our energy and environmental policies, to name just a few. Most importantly for this committee, our government also has policies and programs related to research and development, technology transfer, education, and workforce. However, we have no one examining the impact that government policies are having on manufacturing and how we can be more efficient and effective. This is why I've introduced this legislation. Through coordination of various government agencies that are most involved in manufacturing, and most importantly, coordination with private sector leaders, an evaluation would be conducted of our manufacturing sector's current state and what policies would create the best economic environment in which manufacturers would thrive. It is vitally important that this be a recurrent effort, wherein we can reassess the global and domestic economic environment, technology developments, and other events that will help the United States adapt its policies with the changing world. At the end of the day, this bill is about setting aside politics and implementing policies that will create an environment conducive to the flourishing of American manufacturing, which is vital for middle-class American jobs and for national security. If we continue to muddle through without a coordinated plan, Government will still be impacting manufacturing, but in an uncoordinated, often inefficient, sometimes wasteful manner that handcuffs American businesses. We should change this policy. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses about how we can best do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. The chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Smith, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I would like to thank the subcommittee's ranking member, Dan Lipinski, for sponsoring the bill we are considering at this hearing, the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2013. And Dan, I didn't realize until your opening statement that you've been working on it for 4 long years. So I'm glad we're having this hearing today. And I support Mr. Lipinski's overarching goal, the creation of a manufacturing strategy to better guide government policies and federal spending. We must foster innovation so that powerful new technologies are developed here and not overseas, and so that the United States provides the best environment in which to do business. Made in America is a label we want to see on advanced technologies coming out of American laboratories and factories. And I'm looking forward to this hearing today to focus our discussion on what challenges American manufacturers currently face, what issues this federal manufacturing strategy should address in order to ensure American competitiveness, and possible policy recommendations as well. Finally, Dr. Rich, I understand you manufacture a number of objects, but one of them are these fancy coffee cups we have in front of us today up here. So thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Great. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Jonathan Rich, the chairman and CEO of Berry Plastics, which is located in Evansville, Indiana, in my district. With a portfolio of more than 13,000 products, Berry Plastics is one of the largest global manufacturers of flexible and rigid plastic packaging for food, personal care, pharmaceutical, healthcare, and industrial applications, including the cup that Chairman Smith just pointed out. I had the opportunity to tour their headquarters in Evansville and see firsthand the impressive manufacturing done at this facility. And Berry Plastics employs 15,000 workers at 88 global manufacturing facilities, with approximately 70 of those located in the United States. Dr. Rich has a Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry from Iowa State University and a PhD in chemistry from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In 2010, he was granted an honorary Doctor of Science degree from Iowa State University. Dr. Rich is an inventor with more than 25 issued United States patents and has published 14 scientific journal articles. He is a past director of the Rubber Manufacturing Association and the International Institute of Synthetic Rubber Producers, and is a member of the American Chemical Society and the Society of the Plastics Industry. Welcome, Dr. Rich. Our second witness is Ms. Deborah Wentz-Smith, President and CEO of the Council on Competitiveness. She has more than 20 years of experience as a senior U.S. government official. Notably, she served as the nation's first Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Technology Policy in the administration of President George H.W. Bush, overseeing federal technology transfer policy, implementation of the Bayh-Dole Act, and the White House National Technology Initiative. Ms. Wentz-Smith graduated magna cum laude from Vassar College with a Bachelor's of Arts degree. At King's College at the University of Cambridge, she read for a master's degree in classical archaeology. In 2006, she received an honorary doctorate in humanities from Michigan State University. I'd now like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Lipinski, to introduce our third witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce our final witness, Mr. Zach Model. Mr. Model is a fourth generation of his family to own and operate Atlas Tool and Die Works, which is located in Lyons, Illinois, in my district. The company was founded in 1918. It's a world-class precision manufacturing facility offering a broad array of metal manufacturing services for the defense, aerospace, telecommunications, electronics, and medical industries, among others. In his current role as Chief Alignment Officer, Zach works not only to meet the business needs of new and current customers, but he is engaged in outreach and development strategies that identify operational improvements. In addition to his leadership at Atlas, Zach is serving a second term on the Tooling and Manufacturing Association of Illinois' Board of Directors. TMA represents over 1,000 member companies. In 2011, he was elected by the board to serve as TMA's chairman. I've been to Atlas a number of times. I'm always impressed with the work that they are doing, and I appreciate hearing from Zach about the difficulties that small manufacturing businesses are facing in America. It's my pleasure to have Zach testify today and offer his perspective on the need for a national manufacturing strategy. With that, I welcome Zach Model, and I yield back.
Thank you. And now I'd like to recognize Dr. Rich for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Rich. I'm the chairman and CEO of Berry Plastics Corporation. Berry Plastics, headquartered in Evansville, Indiana, and Indiana's 8th Congressional District, is one of the largest food, personal care, health care, pharmaceutical, and industrial packaging companies in the United States. Starting from a small beginning in 1967 with 3 employees and 1 plastic injection molding machine, today we employ over 15,000 people at approximately 70 United States manufacturing and warehousing facilities, which are located in more than 30 different states. A significant milestone was reached last October when we took the company public and shares of our common stock began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. While Berry Plastics is not a household name, we have over 13,000 customers and we manufacture over 50,000 different packages with our products being found in nearly every household in America. And I've yet to meet someone who doesn't have at least 5 of our products at home right now. Even though Berry is a significant industry player, the global packaging industry in which we participate is extremely competitive. As such, we are diligent in pursuing those initiatives which will allow us to best meet or exceed our customers' expectations. Berry's competitive advantage is rooted in our expertise in manufacturing. Each year we typically invest approximately $250 million in state-of-the-art capital equipment and $50 million in product and manufacturing process research and development. These investments in manufacturing innovation, new product development, and the investments we've made in training for our people are the primary factors which have allowed us to grow at over 20% per year since 1995. It's also the principal reason that we've been able to compete and win in the ever more challenging global marketplace. And yet, if we stop innovating and investing in new technologies, either as a company or a country, then our success will quickly disappear. Throughout our history, Berry has worked cooperatively with federal, state, and local governments with the mutual goal of growth that in turn creates new jobs, that generates consumer spending and tax revenues in our communities. When it all works, we create exciting new products for our customers, new jobs for our communities, and increased value for our shareholders. A great example of this is our new thermal packaging technology that we have branded Versalite, an example of which you have in front of you. Hopefully nobody will ever have to burn their hand again on a cup of coffee here, coming soon to a coffee store near you. So, to fully develop the initial conceptual ideas behind Versalite, we had to invent a new material, a new product, and a new manufacturing technology. I'm very pleased to say that all of this is being installed in our new factory in Madisonville, Kentucky. The support extended by the state and local agencies and the proximity of the new plant to our core engineering base in Evansville made locating in Kentucky the right decision for Berry Plastics. Manufacturing at this one facility should create over 400 new jobs for a community in need of employment opportunities for its citizens. However, it's important to understand that not only is the competitiveness of Americans' manufacturing industries vital to the stability and success of our local communities, it's also vital to our national security. While Berry has not historically participated extensively in government contracts, we have done some work in the past but are not currently working on any active contracts. To be successful, Berry, like other manufacturing companies, must have the ability to invent state-of-the-art products, manufacturing processes, and equipment. But it is imperative that we have the ability to recruit and train the best workforce in the world. The most important single factor that determines our success at Berry and the key to maintaining and expanding America's leadership in manufacturing lies in the development of outstanding engineers, scientists, and our manufacturing labor force. In this regard, companies like Berry have benefited from the important partnerships that we have with universities, vocational schools, and government laboratories and agencies. The strengthening of that relationship between private industry and government is a vital part of the legislation being proposed. My own personal experience is a good example of the long-term benefits of government investments in research and development, for which I've always been grateful. As an undergraduate student at Iowa State, I worked in the Department of Energy's Ames lab, while a graduate student worked at the national research sponsored by National Science Foundation and the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. I am pleased to appear here today in support of the goals targeted by H.R. 2447. The bill's objectives of promoting growth, jobs, sustainability, and competitiveness is vital to our national interests and critical to helping us progress in recovering the economic downturn, the lingering effects of which continue to be felt by companies like Berry. Perhaps the most important aspect of the proposed legislation is the goal of supporting the development of a skilled workforce. The government's in a unique position to support manufacturing-related research and development, United States universities and vocational institutes. It's important that this support contain both generic and targeted objectives. Government agencies such as NSF, the Department of Energy, National Institute of Standards, Department of Defense, NASA, and others are particularly well suited to carry out this mandate. In light of the time, let me close by saying that to succeed, it is imperative that we invest in new materials and manufacturing processes like those being supported in this bill. I'm happy to support the bill and would be willing and interested in participating in, however the private sector may be involved, the development of the strategic plan. I thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here.
Thank you, Dr. Rich. Ms. Wint-Smith, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Bouchon, Ranking Member Lipinski, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to discuss H.R. 2447, the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2013, introduced by Congressman Lipinski. My name is Deborah Wint-Smith, and I am the President and CEO of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. This organization, almost 30 years old, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization comprised of CEOs, labor leaders, university presidents, and national laboratory directors. We come together to set an action agenda for U.S. competitiveness, productivity, and leadership to raise the standard of living and security for every American. Although America remains the world's top producer, our nation has surrendered important manufacturing sectors. They were not all lost in the pursuit of cheap labor or the result of products becoming low-margin commodities. We have lost production of cutting-edge innovations developed in America because, among other reasons, we've had tax, regulatory, workforce skills challenges, finance and infrastructure limitations that made production elsewhere more competitive. The Council on Competitiveness has long recognized that technologically advanced manufacturing and production is essential to our nation's economic growth, prosperity, and national security. Indeed, America's leadership in the development and deployment of next-generation manufacturing is directly linked to our future innovation capacity across all sectors of our economy, including the service economy. In 2009, the Council launched our flagship U.S. Manufacturing Competitiveness Initiative under the leadership of Samuel Allen, the CEO and Chairman of DEER, our Chairman of the Council, and a distinguished group of CEOs, university presidents, labor leaders, and lab directors. Since the start of this initiative, we have held over 18 strategic dialogues across the country, including most recent discussions on the future of additive manufacturing hosted at Oak Ridge National Lab and cyber-enabled manufacturing hosted at Sandia National Lab. These strategic dialogues have brought together hundreds of experts and practitioners from the broader network of the Council, including CEOs from multinationals and startups, research universities, community college presidents, and the laboratory environment as well. And we together challenge ourselves to think, what can we do to achieve America's full manufacturing potential and accelerate the innovation that underpins this transformation? The central recommendations and analysis of the Manufacturing Initiative have been captured in our landmark report, Make, an American Manufacturing Movement, which we released at a summit in 2001. Make lays out many policies and actions the Council recommends to develop a national manufacturing strategy, including many of the concrete initiatives the Administration and Congress have implemented, such as in advanced materials, smart sensors and robotics, additive productions, data analytics and cybersecurity, and digital fabrication utilizing the power of high-performance computing for large enterprises and ensuring we bring this capability down into the supply chain of our small and medium-sized businesses. The Council has called for policy reform and legislative action to create an innovation-friendly ecosystem to attract, retain, and support from startup to scale-up the high-value investment in manufacturing production. We've worked with Deloitte to produce 2 groundbreaking reports looking at what CEOs around the world think about manufacturing competitiveness. In both reports, CEOs ranked access to innovative talent and national economic policies such as trade, tax, IP protection, and standards as the top 2 drivers of manufacturing competitiveness. The Council has long recognized that the cost and access to sustainable energy has a huge impact across every sector. We are very excited to form a new partnership with the Department of Energy, the American Energy and Manufacturing Competitiveness Partnership, to explore the pivotal linkages between energy and new opportunities for the public and private sectors to develop new models for energy efficiency and to embed energy productivity through all manufacturing processes. Without strong public and private support for the complete life cycle innovation and production process, the United States cannot maximize the return on its innovation investments, measured in jobs, growth, tax revenue, and national security. In closing, we urge Congress and the President to develop and implement a national manufacturing strategy to maximize America's manufacturing potential. The American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act, under consideration today by the Subcommittee, is key to our future. The Council strongly supports an enactment by the House and Senate. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for having me today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. That buzzing means they've called a vote, but we'll finish your testimony, Mr. Model, and then after approximately a 45-minute interruption, then we'll take some questions. So I recognize Mr. Model for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chairman Bouchon, members of the committee, Ranking Member Lipinski, for providing me the opportunity to speak before you today. Manufacturing is a subject very near to my heart. I am the 4th generation of my family since 1918 to own and operate our business, Atlas Tool and Die Works. I'm also the Vice President and co-owner of Abet Industries as well as Accushim, Inc. The businesses are located in Lyons and LaGrange, Illinois, in Representative Dan Lipinski's district. All 3 companies are my family's related businesses in precision manufacturing. We make various parts and assemblies for defense, aerospace, telecom, electronics, medical, and industrial industries. Together we employ around 80 people. I also serve as chairman of the Tooling and Manufacturing Association of Illinois. TMA represents 1,000 small and medium-sized manufacturers in the Midwest, and together we employ around 30,000 skilled workers. As an advocate of the critical importance of a healthy and growing manufacturing sector in any national economy, I'm here to support passage of the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2013. I commend Congressman Lipinski and Congressman Kinzinger for their great bipartisan work on this legislation. I think it's great that the administration and Congress are also working to advance manufacturing policy. After all, we really haven't had a national manufacturing policy since Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturers in 1791. One thing that strikes me about this bill is that it makes no assumptions of the best path forward to ensure America is the global manufacturing leader. That's important because there's so many diverse opinions. We've heard from other experts that various things that the manufacturing sector might need. Some people feel free trade's a problem, others say it's tax policy or energy policy. Still other people say it's fine and nothing's needed. With all these opinions, it's difficult to develop a path forward and a much needed national manufacturing strategy. The bill creates a system to thoughtfully and methodically evaluate the issues surrounding the industry, and then outlines a framework to develop a plan for success. As a business owner, I know planning is critical. Plan, execute, review. That's the basic core of any good business model. But unfortunately, when an organization doesn't operate with a plan, what happens is a plan to fail. I also support the administration's efforts in launching the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. As you know, most of the innovation occurs at the local level, and it's realized by small and mid-sized companies in small steps at a time as part of their processes. However, there's some critical components we need from government to be successful. We need predictability and stability, especially in the areas of taxes and regulation. We need research and development tax credits to be permanent. We need a practical relationship between business and government. Too often I find we're moving at different speeds, with government usually moving slower than the private industry is needed to create innovation and jobs. We need government programs to be easily accessible to small and mid-sized manufacturers and to know what tools are available. Large manufacturers can more easily navigate the government juggernaut, but small and mid-sized companies like mine are often overwhelmed. With regard to the much-discussed skills gap in our workforce, I believe there is a gap in manufacturing, and here's why. As a generation of manufacturing shifted overseas, many high schools, technical schools, and even community colleges scaled back hands-on training programs. Today, with manufacturing on the rebound, jobs coming back to the U.S., many manufacturers like myself can't find the skilled workers to run the highly complex, technologically advanced machinery we now use. Many of the remaining training programs have become fragmented and disconnected. Too often, students earn credentials that are not portable and are not nationally recognized. There's been a lot of discussion about STEM recently, and I'd be remiss if I didn't address this subject. I fully support STEM and agree with the need in this country for advanced learning. However, I submit that technical training needs to be on par with advanced learning. We need to offer young adults at least 2 tracks to career success, where technical training is valued just as much as a 4-year college degree. Right now in the United States is operating without a plan in the world economy when it comes to manufacturing, and this is unacceptable for a global superpower. We simply must be the world leader in manufacturing. As we heard, manufacturing is a critical industry and does generate a lot of wealth and a great multiplier effect. In addition, we've got good jobs that value skills, and you can find a lifelong career. It's critical to national defense, and additional facts are included in my written testimony. Many other countries understand these facts. They are constantly and actively working to court manufacturers to locate within their borders. We live in a world with many competitors. They're working to surpass the United States in many areas, and if we ignore what they're doing and neglect to create our own strategy, I can assure you they will succeed. China, Russia, Brazil, Canada, the UK have a clear and detailed strategy, and they're actively working to foster success. They're asking the questions, what can we do to help you sell more product, be more competitive? How can you create more jobs? Furthermore, many of these countries already have developed best practices when it comes to supporting their sectors. The American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act will not only bring the United States into line with our economic competitors, but it will also compel us to study them and learn from them. This type of benchmarking is a standard best practice management technique. Ultimately, the success of any industry depends on many factors. However, our collective will to ensure and achieve success is probably the most important factor. This act and ultimately the strategy developed out of it is an important first step to ensure the long-term health. I applaud Congressman Lipinski, Congressman Kinzinger for their leadership to develop and sponsor the bill. I urge you all to please pass this out of committee and ultimately the full House. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. At this point, we've been called to a vote, so the committee will stand in recess while we vote and reconvene 10 minutes after the last vote. That would be in approximately 45 minutes to an hour. Thank you. The committee will come back to order. Thanks again for the patience of our witnesses and everyone in the crowd and the members. And we wanted to make sure with the great testimony of our witnesses that we had an opportunity to ask some questions that would help us along the lines of what we're discussing today as it relates to manufacturing. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes to start the line of questioning, and I'll start with Dr. Rich. If you had 2 or 3 things that Congress could do to help improve America's competitiveness in manufacturing, could you give us a little insight about what you think those might be?
Yeah. Again, I think the number one most critical item is that we develop and create a base of well-trained and skilled people. The investments that the bill will make in that training, the investments in research and development, making sure that we have the most competitive workforce available in the world, I think that's the number one priority that for companies like ours, we're vitally dependent on our engineering base. So I would urge the committee to make sure to make the appropriate investments in people Secondly, I think the investments in medium and long-term research projects are also vitally important. Along those lines, the government is especially well equipped to invest in the development of certain vital technologies, including materials, diagnostics, sensors, ergonomics, investments in technology that will ensure that our workplaces are both productive and safe and so forth. So, but I completely agree with your opening statement in that we should be careful not to over-intrude into the marketplace and try to pick, as you said, winners and losers. I think their private industry is much more adapted to both responding to the marketplace and, frankly, to taking the bumps when those decisions turn out to be wrong. Private industry and our investors know what those risks are when they take them, as opposed to taxpayers, I think, who are oftentimes, less sure of what those risks might be in advance. So I completely agree with your position on that. Lastly, I think the third thing that I would say is that to have a longer-term perspective, on the vital technologies that are going to be necessary, again, ranging from the capabilities in logistics, the ability to manufacture things rapidly and on time are going to be very important. So those are three things that I would say.
Great, thank you. And I'll talk with Ms. Winch-Smith. My understanding is that some of our trading partners require transfer of intellectual property (IP) in exchange for access to their markets. China, for instance, has set certain IP transfer requirements through forced partnerships with American companies. In other cases, IP has been stolen through cyber espionage. How important it is for a manufacturing strategy to consider these unfair trade practices other countries are doing that may be detrimental to American manufacturing?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical, and I think it's a bedrock issue. There is, as we know, tremendous innovation in the next generation of capabilities in manufacturing. And there's no question that it's being targeted. We have the data and facts on the cyber attacks that are coming from China and other parts of the world, but particularly China, after specific intellectual property. It's also being acquired, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, through the forced technology transfer that goes in partnerships. But I do think we have to change the way we deal with intellectual property in terms of the infringement and protection. Right now, the burden is really on those entities who have been infringed as opposed to the infringers. And, just as we have very strict standards, legal standards and industry standards around safety and health for food products, that what comes into the country, how it's made, and all those things, one of the suggestions I would have is that we need to think about creating a new standard for intellectual property certification, that when any component or product comes into this country in any finished entity, there has to be a certification from the producer that they have not infringed intellectual property, just as they have to do this. So an example I would use is Kellogg's cereal. When they make cereal in Europe, they have 5 standards to meet on how much vitamin D goes in. And they do that in order for this product to be sold. And so I had the honor to be, and I am on the IP Theft Commission that's chaired by former Governor John Huntsman and retired Admiral Dennis Blair. And our report came out in May. Just one factoid. If China had the level of intellectual property protection that the U.S. has, the estimate in this report is we would have an additional $1 trillion in GDP and 2 million more jobs. Now, the manufacturing part is key to this, and so that has to be at the heart of any national manufacturing strategy.
Great. Thank you. My time's expired. Mr. Lipinski, recognized.
Thank you. I usually watching, I know exactly when my time's coming, but very interested in listening to what the the responses that you had were, and there's some things I want to follow down, continue up on. But first, I want to thank all of you for your support of the legislation, and certainly, I think most people here agree, and I certainly agree, that we don't want to be here picking winners and losers. But there's so much more that can be done, just sort of to set out the environment, create the environment, because there's so many government. I think that's one of the things that I have faced with this bill is people say, well, just let the private sector be. But we all know, you all know, that there's a lot of ways that the government is impacting manufacturing already. It's just not doing it necessarily in a smart, thoughtful manner. So I thank all of you for the support of the bill. I look forward to trying out this cup, and tomorrow morning when I drink a cup of tea, I'll put the hot water in there and test that out. So thank you, Dr. Rich, and Ms. Wynn-Smith. Thank you for all of your work with the Council on Competitiveness. We worked together on a lot of manufacturing issues, and I think it's very important that you raise technologically advanced manufacturing here, because I think a lot of people, when they think about manufacturing, they don't think about advanced manufacturing and about new technology and the opportunities that are available, and more being made available every day, especially through the great research and development that's going on in this country at private industry and also in our research universities and national labs. And so I think that's very important that people don't just think about manufacturing as what we've done in the past, although we don't want to abandon that. We want to continue to do that type of manufacturing, but we also have to look to the future. I want to follow up on one of the points that Dr. Rich had said about education and workforce. Mr. Model, in your testimony, you mentioned that the Tooling and Manufacturing Association of Illinois has a new program, the Bridge Work and Pathways Initiative, focused on augmenting the manufacturing training programs of 48 of Illinois community colleges. Can you tell us a bit more about this initiative and its goals? Because obviously this is something that we all understand is critical right now, and some people look out there and say, how could you possibly have a shortage of qualified workers in anything with our high unemployment? But I hear that from manufacturers all the time, is the difficulty in finding qualified workers. So Mr. Mott, can you tell us about that program, anything else you want to talk about in that area?
Thank you. Yeah, well, the Bridgework and Pathways program is, our goal is to get a kind of a standard curriculum going among the 48 community colleges. So I, as a manufacturer, know that if you have a certification in 5-axis precision machining, it's a standard program, and I know what I'm getting when I hire an employee. Also, to help build enthusiasm for these type of programs. A lot of times, parents don't want their children to go into these programs, and I would really love to see from the federal government, the Department of Education, revalue these training programs. What we find with students who go into them and ultimately come to work for my member companies is that they like to come and go from the program. They'll come and they'll take some courses, they'll get a certificate, and then they'll work for a little bit, but they'll come back and take some more classes and layer that together. So what we're trying to do is develop a set of stackable credentials that can add up ultimately to a degree. Maybe you take some capstone courses or some humanities courses and they end up with a degree. So the whole time they're working, they're earning a living with one of our member companies, hopefully, and earning a degree that will ultimately add up to whether it's an associate's degree or a 4-year college degree. But we've just found that in general, the programs were very fragmented. Everybody had a different program, and it didn't necessarily jive with what manufacturers like myself wanted out of the program. So that's what we're doing with Bridgeworks and Bridgeways and Pathways.
Thank you, and I will yield back the rest of my time, and hopefully we'll have a chance to ask a few more questions. Thank you.
Ms. Esty, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bouchon, for holding today's hearing, and I'm proud to join Representative Lipinski in co-sponsoring this important legislation. And I want to thank the three of you for your patience with our unpredictable voting schedule. I too want to follow up on this discussion, this very important discussion about workforce development, because it really does seem to be, in a lot of ways, the linchpin. In Connecticut, we're working very hard on these same issues. I have a longtime manufacturing district which is struggling with this. And I'm hearing from manufacturers in my district like Ward Leonard in Thomaston and Access Technologies in Farmington and Alltech Electronics in Torrington, and hearing directly from these same questions about certification programs, access to training programs, credentialing issues. And frankly, one of the issues that we've been struggling with is the legacy of having lost these manufacturing jobs in the past. And we have been looking at this issue about young people who might be very interested themselves if they knew more about the salary ranges, what the work entailed, but their parents or grandparents may be deeply suspicious because their experience was so bad with these jobs having been lost. Now, that being said, from your perspective and experience, what do we think the best way is to engage young people? How do we bring them in? Is this something we should be looking with getting better teaching and more exciting teaching in elementary and secondary school in STEM technologies? Should this be around apprenticeship and training programs? What can you suggest to us is the best route to go?
I'm assuming that's for me. Yeah, I have an interesting perspective on that. So we've done some summer camp program at TMA. That's one of our first steps. We now do a program for young kids. I think they're in 5th grade and 6th grade. And they come to our summer camp program on manufacturing. In fact, it's going on right now. It's a 2-week program, and a lot of what we do is we take them to manufacturers and show them the high-tech manufacturing. It's computerized. It's one person operating multiple machines that are doing multiple operations. It's really high-tech stuff. I think as manufacturers, especially small ones, we sell ourselves short and forget to say we are high-tech. We really are. And so that's one program we've done. Also, we've put together a pamphlet. I had the pleasure of having Senny Hoyer came to visit, and we were able to show him at TMA the pamphlet that we have for young people. And what it does is it shows different careers and different wage ranges and salaries and the training you need to get there. So you can see that if you spend a few $1,000s and take a couple months of certification programs, you can come out right away making $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000 a year as a machinist. And that's where you get the parents excited. They say, boy, I don't have to load up on $30,000 in college debt. I can take a few $1,000s of training courses and come right out and be working. So I think that's important to get the parents on board, because I personally have hired people and had the young person ready to take the job, and the parents said, no, you're not going to go work in manufacturing. It's not the career for you. So I think that's important. Also, we have a Women in Manufacturing Committee at TMA who is working with the Girl Scouts to get a program going, getting young girls into engineering and STEM programs. So I don't know all the details of the program because they're just putting it together, but that's something that they're working with the Girl Scouts in the Chicagoland area, again, at a very young age.
And actually, for all of you following up on this, we've discussed previously in this subcommittee the German model and looking at what Germany has done in its vocational training. And for all three of you, if you could suggest to us what lessons you think are learnable by us for best practices for beefing up that relationship between the business community and the educational community to provide those skills we need now.
Well, I can speak directly to that, having lived in Germany for 3 years and worked in a chemical facility there. I was able to participate in the training program there. I think, look, we have to have the appropriate apprentice and training programs here in the United States. We do it a little bit differently here. In Europe, many times the companies will take multiple years of apprentice programs, but people also commit to working their whole lives with the same company. Here we have the dilemma of people moving company to company more, and this is where I think there's a great opportunity for partnership between private enterprise and the government. In the state of Indiana, we have a terrific program through the Ivy Tech vocational schools. At Barry, we take tremendous advantage of that. Those kinds of and we also provide a lot of the financial support for that in addition to the government. So I think those kinds of government industry cooperations can be a terrific part of what this bill is all about.
I would just add that, the workforce boards in each state have access to significant funding from the Department of Labor, and that we really need to ensure that those resources are being aligned with the demands and needs that are coming, from the employers as a first order. Secondly, there are a number of very innovative, advanced labor unions. I will mention the pipe fitters and plumbers in particular. I know that union very well. Its president's very active in the Council on Competitiveness. This union, does very high-skilled work. They do the welding on nuclear subs. You go through their training. They pay for everything. You get a certificate as a journeyman welder. You make, depending on where you are in the country, $60,000 to $80,000 a year. They're bringing that training to our military bases for returning veterans, and it's a very strong partnership with the companies that use pipe fitters and plumbers. So that collaborative partnership between business and labor needs to be extended to other parts of the economy. And finally, I would say on the engineering issue that was raised, STEM is absolutely critical, we know that, but we also need to take the E in STEM and blow that out, because at the end of the day, everything we're talking about requires engineering, design engineering, engineering that goes through the whole product cycle, and we are not elevating the engineering discipline in this country to the way we can and should. The Council on Competitiveness is making this a very big thrust. We're teaming with Lockheed Martin to create the National Engineering Forum, which we hope over time will become the Davos for engineering. But engineering is something that needs to start, in K through 12 and really be elevated the way it was at different times in our history.
Thank you. We'll have, I think, one more round of questioning, and then we'll adjourn the hearing. I guess I can ask Dr. Rich this question. The nature of manufacturing today is very complex, and it's difficult to clearly differentiate sometimes between manufacturing and the services that support it. How would you recommend the Nstc Committee on Technology take into account the very complex network of the players involved when developing a manufacturing strategy? And is it appropriate to develop policies that treat manufacturing differently from other sections of the economy when there's such this interconnectedness? How do you fit that all together?
Well, I think the lines of distinction between service and manufacturing are clearly blurring, right? A lot of that has been driven by the tremendous advances in IT technology, which allows you to put support and service into the products that you make. So I don't think you can disconnect those two subjects anymore. And I would urge the committee to think about how you take the appropriate technologies, especially in IT, and apply those. When we make a product, our relationship with the customer doesn't end after we've put the product in a box and ship it out. We have a lifetime responsibility for that product and a lifetime responsibility for the relationships with our customers. So I wouldn't draw a hard line of distinction there.
Ms. Winsmith?
Yes, absolutely. Manufacturing and services are merging, blending, as Dr. Rich said, and a lot of the value now comes from this merger. So you think of a company like Deere, where they're making the most advanced high-tech equipment in the world for harvesting and agriculture and other applications. They're also a weather forecaster. They're a consultant to farmers, and they're a financer, and all that gets wrapped around. And you think of the great potential of data analytics and all of that for enabling advance. That too is part of this. So we really need to look at manufacturing in a different way with different language. It's an extended enterprise. Everything from the ideation, the design, the advanced research, how the logistics supply chain enables this. Again, that's a lot of IT capability, and the whole full life cycle. So service innovation and how it links to manufacturing should be a very important part of the strategy.
Mr. Model, you have comments on that?
Yeah, I would say, as a small business, we are selling more and more services to our customers as well. They have outsourced their engineering. They don't do any work in-house. They say, we need you to make the product. We need you to design it as well. So we'll sell design services. But I would say maybe I'm not an honest broker, but I think manufacturing is certainly the most important industry we have here. I mean, clearly, but the multiplier effect is what speaks for it. When you're in manufacturing, you need transportation. It's the factors of production. You buy equipment, and that requires shipping services. You need attorneys. You need lawyers. Now, every service needs, supporting, every industry has supporting services, but manufacturers, simply because of the factors of production, whether you're bringing your raw materials in, you're shipping finished goods out, you're bringing equipment in, you're building a building to do it, that's why I think it's the most important industry.
Okay, thank you. I yield to Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you. I'm tempted to just use the 5 minutes and ask Ms. Winsmith to continue to say all these great things about engineers. As one of less than a dozen engineers in Congress, I'd like hearing the importance of engineers and engineering. But I'm going to have a general question first for Mr. Model, then Dr. Rich, and then Ms. Winsmith, what you can add to that. The question is, in your opinion, what can the federal government do? I know, Mr. Model, we've talked about issues with the state, but leave those off the table. What could the federal government do to make your business more competitive?
Well, a lot of business owners will say, just stay out of the way. And, that is important. But setting a level playing field and setting a good table, I like to use the analogy of a buffet. If you set a great buffet out, we'll all come and eat. So, whether it's the tax policy, energy policy, if we have good, stable planning and policies, I can build my business around that. If I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, whether it's the R&D credit or energy policy, we sell a lot of products into the oil and gas production industry. Is that industry going to be growing like it's growing now, or is it going to change in a few years? It's very hard, so stability is important. From my perspective, transportation is really important too. The federal government does a lot for transportation. I'm constantly moving goods in, bringing in raw materials, and shipping out finished goods. So I need a good, stable transportation network that's well maintained. Of course, we talked about the IP theft and trade issues. I saw what happened in the telecom and electronics industry. My company historically built mechanical switching. Western Electric was our customer, then AT&T, and all throughout. But I saw what happened when we kind of opened the doors and bought the cheapest product we could buy. We lost a lot of the value that we added here in the U.S. when it went, to the lowest cost country. So I think sometimes some government policies need to look at, what is worthwhile to be building here? What is the cost of it? You can pay less for a product, but the value maybe isn't there because you didn't get the jobs, you didn't get the growth, you didn't get the tax from those jobs and that sale of the product. So a little bit smarter planning maybe on trade issues I think would be important for businesses like mine as well.
Dr. Rich?
Again, I think first and foremost, the most important thing, which again is being addressed in this bill, is the investment in people. Beyond that, I would say, look, the appropriate balance of regulation is also important. Let me give you a specific example. My personal view is that we're on the cusp of one of the greatest industrial revolutions here in the United States that we've seen since maybe the beginning of the 20th century with the development of North American shale gas. The sheer extraction of the energy, the lower costs will create thousands of jobs, but the secondary industries, which create new materials, new products based on that, will create even more jobs. We have to be able to develop this infrastructure and simultaneously protect the air and the water that we all need. I always view that as the concept of responsible progress. We can make responsible progress and develop these natural resources. It's going to require a lot of new technologies. I don't accept the fact that it can't be done and not simultaneously protect the environment. There's a tremendous opportunity for new technology there, but we also have to have balanced regulations to make sure that we can take advantage of these resources. This could be the greatest industrial revolution that we've seen, and certainly in my lifetime, and it'll create an enormous number of jobs.
Thank you. Ms. Winsmith, anything you want to add to that?
I would just add, I fully endorse what my two colleagues here have said. The whole issue of America going from being a country that's energy weak to energy strong as we lead the transformations to a low carbon world in the future is so important. But one thing the government can do that no one else can do is to really capitalize in a systems way these transformations in the science and technology and their deployment. You know, if we can be the country that, you know, develops and manufactures at scale non-lithium batteries, if we can be the country that, you know, sets the standards for additive manufacturing production, we know what the future is beginning to look like. And there are ways in which if we capture the, not just the research, but the deployment here, it will be huge. And so this bill is very important because it talks about an integrative strategy. Defense Department has huge needs and capabilities here. If you link that with NSF and DOE and the other parts of the government with the cap, it's just, we have tremendous potential. So connecting the dots, you all have in the government the capacity to do that, and the private sector will really come to the table as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Estee, 5 minutes.
I'd love to follow up on that last point and relate it to for all three of you. First question is on the role of basic research, and in manufacturing in particular, if there are areas that, again, that the federal government has an important role to play in basic research. So that's the first question. And the second one is this linkage that you just mentioned, Ms. Winsmith, about the linkage for deployment. We have some vigorous debate going on. We had votes this afternoon that had to go exactly around this issue. What should be the role of the federal government in deployment of technologies and of research that's being developed? So love your thoughts on both of those questions. Thank you.
I'll just use one example that captures it. I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to be at University of Toledo in Ohio. And coming from Akron, I knew Toledo, but I wasn't aware that this university really did all the basic research for the genesis of the solar industry, built on their glass history and things. And, you know, they created, First Solar came out of that entity, but, you know, all the manufacturing, all the infrastructure went to China for a lot of the capital cost regulatory issues. So somehow we have to link this basic research, where we still lead the world in many areas, with the conditions for ensuring deployment. And that, of course, gets to the power of government procurement, state procurement, as well as perhaps even, and this may sound a little pushing the envelope, but why can't we think the way some of our competitors do about creating some advanced manufacturing zones where there are huge privileges and opportunities to be the first users of these capabilities? I heard in Toledo, they have a plan to create buildings that will be net zero energy with the next generation solar panels. How can we make that happen? So it is exciting, but we have some challenges because the rest of the world is looking at our basic research as the seed corn for their next generation products and services. And we got to make sure we capture the value here as well.
One of the things that would be helpful to follow up on is this question, which I think you're absolutely right about state and government procurement being part of that investment by the society, by taxpayer dollars in the society, ensuring we develop those robust markets here, not just the technology that then is produced elsewhere, but that we put our bang for the buck behind it to get to scale, because we aren't getting to scale, and that remains a problem. And it's not good enough just to develop the technology and license it to the world, or worse yet, have them steal it and take it and develop it elsewhere. So helping us and think about the right way to do those procurement rules so it doesn't be picking winners and losers. You know, how do you develop criteria that is not picking winners and losers and yet is putting a goal out there that our great engineers and scientists work towards to achieve and then bid on and take advantage of, as you mentioned, Mr. Model. We have to find a way to incorporate the value of producing it here, the value of those jobs, as compared to the value of paying people who can't find work. And we need help on that because it isn't part of our calculation now, and I think it should be. When you look at what is the lowest cost producer for DOD, you should estimate the cost of not employing American engineers, the cost of not having visas for high-tech students who came to this country and would love to stay.
Well, there's a great quote by Abraham Lincoln. I'm going to butcher it a little bit on the numbers, though. He said, you know, we could buy our rails from England, and we'll have the rails, and they'll have the gold, or we can make the rails here for maybe a little more expensive. I'm butchering the numbers, but he said, then we'll have the gold and the rails. So we need to think about that and that value. But you know, when we talk about the tech transfer, we had a unique discussion here before about Argonne Labs. I'm right there. My company's right nearby, and they brought myself and some other small manufacturers in and said, hey, we have all these patents and technologies. How can we partner with you to get them? We scratched our heads and said, you know, we just don't have the capital. As a small business, access to some kind of low-cost capital where I could use that money and tie up this technology and have the time to figure out how to use it. Where they said, you know, a lot of Korean companies buy up all their patents, in particular one company, and they have a lot of cash, and I don't know if that cash is somehow supplemented through government programs, but they're getting a lot of the technology simply because they have access to the cash. And if I had the ability to have the cash and the time to play with the technology, I know I could, you know, companies like mine could work with it.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from members. The witnesses are excused and the hearing is adjourned.